this meeting of the Equal Opportunities Forum held on the 27th of February 2024. I have apologies from Councillor Kalikas. I'm just checking to see if we have a substitute. I'm not seeing any. Present today is Councillor Clark. I have apologies from Councillor Corbett. Also present today are Councillors Cowie and Ferguson. Councillor McAdams? No, not seeing you. Also present today are Councillors McGeever and Razak. I have apologies from Councillor Robb. Councillor Thompson? I know that Councillor Thompson was having problems. Is it? Councillor Thompson is having problems connecting, but we'll keep an eye out for him. We have contacted colleagues in IT. We also have a number of officers present today, and with that I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Firstly, can I ask if there's any declarations of interest? No. Okay. And we go on to minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. Any questions? No. Okay. And we go on to the third one, autism. Let's all understand. And we have Raymond Hutchison and Adam McGregor. Sorry, it's Raymond Hutchinson. Sorry, apologies for that. Okay.
I suppose my presentation might be slightly different from the kind of formal presentations that the committee may be used to. My name's Ramon Hutchinson. I am the coordinator of the Autism Resources Coordination Hub in Hamilton. We are Pan South Lanarkshire. We cover all localities within the Health and Social Care Partnership. We began in 2016 as a result of the closure of the former Pan Lanarkshire one-stop shop that had been managed by a third sector organisation. So we've been going for about 8 years now. We are a unique entity, if I can call us that, when we're comparing ourselves to the other one-stop shop models throughout Scotland. I think there's 4 or 5 other one-stop shops. We're unique in the sense that we remain very firmly planted within the local authority. We are part of the local authority, but we work collaboratively with the community, and we partners and stakeholders in the third sector, the private sector, and the community-based sector. So we're very much a bottom-up as opposed to top-down model. I think it can be sometimes it can be referred to as the asset-based community development approach, which is a wee bit of a rebadging of the old community work. But it's encapsulated by 4 concepts: collaboration, communication, cooperation and co-production. So that's very much what we're about. It's a strength-based asset model that we work alongside the neurodiverse community. And that's the kind of small introduction that I'd like to make. In terms of the presentation, I believe I'm just going to ask our colleagues to turn the page as I'm talking. So I'll just say next page, if that's all right. Yeah. So we'll go to the next page. And as a brief overview, really this whole presentation is an abridged version of the autism awareness sessions that we have been running for the past 8 years. There is a dearth of autism awareness and understanding sessions throughout Scotland. Most of them are offered by the third sector. And I think that really it's a kind of significant unmet need. So what I start with is this slide which talks about what we'd like the outcomes of the presentation to be for the participants, and that would be to have a better understanding and awareness of autism, including its unique expression in autistic individuals, to be aware of the strengths as well as the challenges. I think it's crucial to say that Arch very much embodies the strength-based asset approach. So it's very much in contrast to a deficit-based model Some people may call that the medical model, where medical a diagnosis is by its very nature reductionist and deficit based. So it's all about what people cannot do as opposed to what people can do, as well as what their challenges are. So we very much focus on those strengths as well as the challenges. It would be foolish to ignore the challenges, obviously. To also have an understanding of why neurodivergent people need informed levels of supports. And I suppose as a brief kind of reference, we are underway in terms of the public consultation for the Learning Disability, Autism and Neurodiversity Bill at the Scottish Government. It's ending in April, and I think that it's more than clear that the neurodivergent community, neurodiverse community, need much better support than they've had to date. It's also about perhaps wanting to know more and finding out other sources of information. I hope that anyone who's in attendance today or viewing would approach myself, would give us a phone at Arch and ask for anything that they need or any further guidance. I've already had several elected members picking my brains, formally and informally, and I have no problem with that. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, or they have any constituents that they think could benefit from Arch or from advice or guidance, then please feel free to do that. And also, ultimately, to feel confident and competent in supporting neurodiverse people, neurodivergent individuals in your day-to-day activities as elected members and as members of the community. So that's what the anticipated outcomes are. Maybe a wee bit ambitious for such a limited presentation, but that's what I would like to aspire to. So we can turn to the next slide. In terms of the theory, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is a kind of manual that's used largely in North America, and there's the International Classification of Diseases, and these were the kind of medical diagnostic criteria to define autism. And again, they're very reductionist. They're about the challenges, they're about the deficits, they're not about the assets. And basically, in the last 2 or 3 years, that definition has changed. It's gone from a very medicalised terminology. It was central coherence, executive function, and theory of mind, which, as you can hear, is very medicalised, very psychiatric in its orientation, to what is now called the triad or the dyad of impairment. And that is about social interaction, social communication, and social imagination. And the two wee graphics there sum that up. Because sometimes there's a bit of confusion because it's called a dyad. The slide below that's talking about the social communication interaction is merging communication and interaction, but I prefer to keep it as a triad because it clearly is threefold: social communication, social interaction, and imagination. So, the next slide, please. Social interaction. So what is social interaction in a lived and living context? It's about starting conversations. It's about meeting new people and initiating dialogue. It's about social awkwardness. It's about holding and sustaining conversations. It's exchanging or trading stories, views, opinions with others in that social interaction that we all take for granted as neurotypical people. Some of the challenges in social interaction also include not understanding non-verbal communications, such as body language or facial expressions. It's about struggling with those things. That's the kind of emotional recognition and social recognition challenges that come alongside autism and neurodiversity generally. It's also, social interaction is also about establishing and maintaining eye contact. There is a stereotype that autistic people don't sustain eye contact. That is a stereotype. There are as many people in our community who overly stare rather than avoid eye contact. So it's very much down to the individual expression. I think Tony Atwood once said, I think it might have been Lorna Wing, said when you meet an autistic person for the first time, you meet an autistic person for the first time. Everybody is very different. And while there are unifying elements, as we just said in the triad, there are also very different expressions in that. So there's also about socially distancing. Again, we see that a lot in our autistic children and young people who may misunderstand the concept of personal space and social distancing may intrude on that and don't understand the nuances that, again, as neurotypical individuals, we take for granted, that we are kind of hardwired to understand that. And mirroring others. Mirroring others can either be mimicking, basically, or sometimes just repeating things that are said in a quite scripted manner. So that's just some of the elements of social interaction. Next slide, please. Social communication. Now, these are not mutually exclusive, these three categories, as you'll see, but it is about difficulties in recognising and understanding social cues, challenges in adjusting behaviour. So many autistic individuals, for example, as employees, may not recognise hierarchy or may not acknowledge hierarchy, and that you can imagine that might bring them into a few kind of difficulties in hierarchical organisations. However, and I've said here, many autistic people have the capacity to acquire these skills. What we say in Arch is it's not an absence of will, it's an absence of skill. And if it's an absence of skill, then that's a very hopeful message that the autism community can be given, to be able to say that it's not a fixed condition, nothing is fixed, it's all entirely changeable. And we've had that backed up with a lot of local, recent neurological research into neuroplasticity and the capacity of the brain to change and evolve and learn. Okay, next slide, please. Social imagination, and this can be restrictive or repetitive behaviours and thinking patterns. Social imagination is perhaps more akin to the last triad that I referred to, the medicalised triad, the central coherence. And central coherence can be best explained as not seeing the forest for the trees, not being able to kind of look in a general way. Somebody once said that autistic people specify more and generalise less, and neurotypical people generalise more and specify less. So I find that a good way of trying to kind of conceptualise this issue. So social pragmatic communication disorder, another category in psychiatry, is very, very common within our community, and that's about understanding someone's meaning beyond their explicit utterance. So being able to understand the nuances of a conversation, what somebody's actually getting at, if they're being sarcastic or there's an underlying communication. Many autistic children, young people and adults don't pick that up, and they're very black and white and literal in the way that they perceive the world and the filter through which they view the world. Perspective-taking challenges, putting yourself in another person's shoes. I was actually smiling outside. There's another meeting going on, and there was some people putting goggles on to understand, what it was like to walk in another person's shoes under influence of, I think it was substances of one kind or another, prescribed or illicit substances. I wasn't sure, but certainly that's what I picked up. They were really trying to walk a few yards in another person's shoes. So that's about taking perspective of someone else. And again, for autistic people, that can be a challenge. It can be a challenge to understand how their behaviour impacts on others. That theory of mind, coming back to the original medical terminology, theory of mind being, if I do something, then most of the time as a neurotypical person, I will understand what the potential impact may be on you or what your potential reaction may be. But for many autistic people, that's not the case. That's much more limited and much more of a challenge. Difficulties in self-awareness, that introspective, that capacity to understand yourself. There are lots of big words associated with our community, the neuroception, interoception, alexithymia. These are terms that are referring to the individual's capacity to view their own emotions, to label their own emotions, to label other people's emotions, and that can be a huge issue as well. So self-monitoring can represent that challenge. And relying on ritualised or highly repetitive activities or speech patterns, that's about familiarity, structure, routine, is very much a benchmark within our community, that when you are in a world of people you don't understand and with communications that you don't entirely understand, sometimes you fall back on very familiar ways of speaking or very familiar ways of behaving, and that can become quite ritualised and repetitive. It's sometimes, some elements of that can be called stimming, self-stimulation. It's not entirely stimming, it can also be about routine and predictability and having a sense of control and agency over an otherwise very strange world. It's a bit like, I've often talked, Adam and I have talked, and it sometimes could be akin to being dropped in Main Street Tokyo and being expected to make your way home when you don't speak the language. That can be what it's like. And lastly, difficulties with change or transition is a huge issue. There is numerous documents about transitions and supporting children, young people and adults from the autism and neurodivergent community with transitions, but even just on a day-to-day basis, on a lived experience, making the transition from home to school back to home. These are huge, huge issues that can engender real challenges for our community and for the people who are caring for them as well. So next slide. But let's try and have a person-centred definition. I think that's far better than all this diagnostic and medicalised language. Autism is a way of being. It's pervasive, so it's an identity that colours every experience and every sensation and perception, emotion and encounter in every aspect of your existence. It's not possible to separate that autism from the person, and if it was, the person you'd have left would not be the same person you started with, and that's by Jim Sinclair, who's an autistic person himself. And that very much fits in with Arch as part of the neurodivergent community. We are proud to say that South Lanarkshire Council is one of only 2 or 3 authorities in the whole of Scotland who fly the Autism Pride flag in Autism Pride Week, Autism Pride Day and Autism Awareness Week in April and in July, I think it is this year. And we have been doing so for the past 5-6 years. I think along with the Scottish Government, we are proud to say that we are one of the only few. I think Highland is another, and I think that one of the other authorities have this year said they were going to be flying the flag. We also, some of you may know, the townhouse last year was lit up for Autism Pride Day as well. So very proud of that. And I think that that fits very much in with an emerging identity. We know about the women's rights movement, the black rights movement, the LGBTQ rights movement, and the neurodivergent community is very much, a new aspect of those movements about seeking recognition and representation, and seeking the supports that they have for generation sorely lacked. Next slide, please. So this kind of just captures everything, I think. When I was talking about the nuances of individual expression, the day-to-day lived experience, it's one word, but it's describing a million different stories. And every individual story is different. That's why I think so many people struggle to conceptualise, so many neurotypical people struggle to conceptualise the autism community because it doesn't fit neatly into one box or another. For example, many people confuse learning disability with autism. And, the most recent research is clearly specifying that only 20% or so, less than 20% of our community have a learning disability, a coexisting learning disability. So over 80% do not have a learning disability of any kind. And they're the people who are struggling. The people with learning disabilities, by and large, do have services, do have supports, and are recognised because that's palpable, that's tangible. You can see their support needs. Many in our community have an invisible support need, have things that are much less visible. And it's about recognising that, it's about understanding that, and that's why autism awareness and training is so crucial. So it's that one word describing a million different stories. Next slide. So, how many people, you can put the whole thing down if you like, thank you. How many people are autistic? I think it's interesting. There's been lots and lots of kind of different research, and up until, I think during the noughties, it was kind of generally accepted it was 1 in 100. It'd gone from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 100. But the most recent up-to-date research is quite clearly saying it's at least 1 in 57. That was by the Cambridge Autism Research Centre. And I just translated that, if that was applicable, and we know that it's seriously underrepresented, underestimated within Lanarkshire, that would be at least 11,500 families and individuals. That's pan-Lanarkshire. And And that coincides with the kind of recent research from 2020 from the Centre for Disease Control in North America, which is probably the biggest research institute in the world. And that, the ratio is 1:59. Traditionally, males and females ratio has been seen as 4 males to 1 female. We know that that's absolutely inaccurate. And I think that that is by and large due to the female expression being very different for the male expression, and that the female expression is more commonly seen, it's referred to as masking, that females mask far more than males, that females generally, and not exclusively, but generally will act in as opposed to males acting out. So their expression, by and large, in many respects, flies under the radar in education, health, social care, and they live, in many instances, lives of daily despair, not having any support whatsoever, or worse, getting misdiagnosed and by extension mistreated by psychiatric services who misdiagnose bipolar, borderline personality, various other psychiatric disorders. And really the real reason is because they are autistic. And that's something that we hope will change in the future. We also know that a very small percentage of autistic people have what's called an extreme demand avoidance profile. It has been in the past called pathological demand avoidance. We shun any pathologising language. It's not acceptable, it's pejorative, it's negative. So it can be called a pervasive drive for autonomy, if you want to call it that. But extreme demand avoidance is how we, within South Lanarkshire, prefer to refer to demand avoidance. And it has a specific profile. It seems to gain a lot of attention at the moment because it takes a lot of time and resources, particularly in education, for those small amount of autistic individuals who have that profile. It can demand a lot of time and resources to deal with it. We also know that over 70% of autistic people have mental health problems. And just while I'm on that subject, you know, we know that the mental health legislation is currently under review, has been under review for the past 5 years in Scotland. There was 2 reviews. One was called the Rome Review, and that was by and large very inclusive and included the entire learning disability, autism and neurodiverse community. And the other was called the Scott Review, which was undertaken by John Scott QC into the mental health law. And as it stands, mental health legislation in Scotland defines autism and learning disability as mentally disordered, which is unacceptable, and is actually potentially contravening the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So we would like to see that changed, but we do acknowledge that, you know, a very high proportion of our community also have mental health problems that need support. And that, obviously I've mentioned before, that more than 2 out of 3 autistic people do not have an intellectual disability, and that can form a challenge for services who traditionally want to focus much of their resources, much of their attention on, you know, those who have the highest support needs. To put it more simply, the squeaky wheel gets the most oil. And I think that it's perhaps redefining that and understanding that the implications of not supporting our community are enormous economically and in terms of quality of life. And that could be backed up by reports such as the microsegmentation report that was produced in 2018 that clearly said that autism costs the Scottish economy more than the 5 big killers, more than cancer, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, and the other one, I can't remember the other one was, but the 5 big killers, basically. And yet it draws the least amount of investment. So it's costing a huge amount of money, most of which is escapable if we just put in a tiny wee bit of investment. So next slide, please. I thought I would put this in for your information. It was really interesting. I went to the cross-party group in autism, the National Autism Implementation Team. I always get the 2 mixed up. The National Autism Implementation Team in the Scottish Government in April of last year. And Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS have done quite a huge study. And basically in 2020 to 2022, there was something like a 260% increase in adult autism diagnostic referrals. But the reasons for adults accessing diagnostic services are mirrored in everything that we do in ART. So we very much chime with these figures. So about finding an identity and having an assessment and understanding what's going on. Over 99% of people looking for a diagnosis, adults, are looking for that. An explanation and a help and support with day-to-day living. Psychological therapy, education and employment is a huge issue, over 80% of our community, and it's not that 85%, over 80% of the autism community are known in full-time employment or education placements as adults, and that's a huge drain on the economy and a huge issue for our community in terms of quality of life. Problems. Relationships are a huge issue. Finances, clearly, if you don't understand the nuances of social interaction, finances can often be a foreign country for you. Justice services, huge issue. I'm involved in the problem-solving court at the court across the road, and that's a huge issue in terms of the very much over-representation of the neurodivergent community within justice services, including youth justice and the children's hearing system. And obviously recreational drug use, substance misuse is a huge issue too. So there are lots of cross-cutting agendas, and if you go to the next slide, you'll see I just wanted to list some of those cross-cutting agendas. Why do we need to pay attention to this? Because it's poorer mental health outcomes, it's poorer physical health outcomes, education outcomes, and I've included a wee report in there called Not Included, Not Engaged, Not Involved, that was produced a few years back by the main Scottish autism charities, and it clearly showed that the mainstream education system is not catering to the needs of the autism community. Greater prevalence of restraint and seclusion. Within this LDAN bill, the Learning Disability, Autism and Neurodiversity bill currently underway, there's also a section in that about restraint and seclusion, because there is yet again a far too much restraint and seclusion for our community within education throughout Scotland. Greater levels of unemployment, higher prevalence of homelessness, significant suicide rates, and the figures have been quoted at various times in some studies as 9 times the average, but at others 26 times the average. And we know that in Scotland, one of the biggest killers in men under the age of 45 is suicide, and remains so. So if it's 26 times that prevalence, I think that kind of amply illustrates how urgent it is that we support the autism and neurodivergent community. Greater dependence on benefits, that's one of the escapable costs. I've mentioned there the microsegmentation report. Poorer outcomes in justice services. We don't have, as we speak, there are no autism-specific relapse prevention programmes throughout the country. There are several for learning disabled individuals, and they are targeted for them, but there are none that are tailored for autistic people within justice services. Greater levels of addiction and dependency. Again, autism-informed intervention, we know is required, and we know, and I've done many presentations to some colleagues in addiction services within Lanarkshire, and they are crying out for additional information and training in relation to how they can tailor their services for those individuals who come to their attention. Greater levels of victimisation, particularly females, and that's a huge issue. Gender-based violence for autistic women is a massive unresolved issue, and greater levels of abuse and neglect as children. And you can see there pretty shockingly, autistic children, young people, and other children, young people with learning disabilities are 400 to 500% greater risk of abuse and maltreatment. And the last point is, the mortality relating to epilepsy. There's a wonderful charity called SUDEP, Sudden Unexpected Death Through Epilepsy, and if you're interested, go on their website. And it's heartening to see that there is a charity that's trying to address this issue, but we know that there is a far greater prevalence of autistic people within the autism community as well who are dying unnecessarily because of uninformed services and supports. So it kind of draws quite a negative picture, but I think I wanted to put that up for the committee to see how urgent it is that reform is required, that we more than ever now require to be focusing on this as an issue. So next slide. This is just a wee page from a profile tool that we created in Arch. It was created several years ago, and it was in response to the community, and particularly parent carers, saying they didn't have any real way of communicating to professionals what their children's issues were, and it was just a wee graphic. There's some of the autism profile tool leaflets up in the back table if anybody would like to take some copies, as well as the Arch public information leaflet. And while I'm on that subject, public information is a huge issue as well. The lack of accessible, inclusive public information is a massive issue within our community as well. What's the point of having services if people don't know they exist or can access them? Next slide. And I'll leave you on this thought, that when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So thank you for your attention. I'm willing to take any questions, and obviously Adam is going to follow on from me, but it might be more appropriate to kind of ask if anyone has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. Any questions?
I'm happy to wait till Adam's finished.
Adam, are you keen to start with it?
I've got Councillor Thompson.
Okay. Bert, do you want to wait until Adam does his presentation? Bert, are you happy to wait till Adam does his presentation?
Yeah, can you hear me, Chair? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair, no problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Adam McGregor. I've been asked to come in today to talk about my experience through systems as an autistic young person and now as an autistic adult. I'm 24 years of age. I was diagnosed at the age of 3 when my brother was diagnosed a year prior to me. So when I first went to primary school, I started out in a mainstream school for 3 years. Most of my time there was fine. I mean, as kids do, I didn't really think about a lot. I just ran around and did what I had to do. After that point, I got brought into a CDU unit in Châtellerault, where I was taught certain things and given help with speech and language therapy. Usually this just helped me break the standard sort of path of education, gave me little breaks, allowed me to, learn at my own pace. For the most part, primary school was completely fine for me. The systems in place were solid and, well maintained. After primary school, I went to just down the road, Hamilton Grammar School, where I was immediately hit by the wall of stress that was entering a new environment, and I struggled almost immediately to focus on classes and the vast amount of things I had to take in and learn. I gained moderate support from the CDU bases and the support teachers that were there to help me. During my break times, I would spend almost every minute of that in the CDU base. I wouldn't dare to venture out of this essentially safe space for fears of repercussion and aggression. Quite often when I was in high school, I was assaulted and threatened with violence purely because I was known to be autistic. I had sharp bits of metal put up to my throat. I had constant slings of abuse. I was told that I would be essentially slaughtered. So obviously high school wasn't great, but that sort of over time built up a need to find more supports, a need to find more things to help. most of the time I tried to find helping peers and people that I could, meet and talk to. Obviously, it was pretty hard for me to make friends in the mainstream. I wasn't really out there enough to talk to people. So I made a small friends group in the CD units. Had great talks with them, talked about stuff that we were all interested in. It was fine, but I always thought there would be more out there for me. Let's see. To get you away from the heavy stuff and tell you a wee funny story. As an autistic adult, I have a few issues with understanding sarcasm, jokes. I sometimes misunderstand things. So you might remember a story from Hamilton Grammar a few years back. I was presenting a story on World War II, a presentation, and we brought in some props and things. So I asked, would it be fine if I brought in a disarmed grenade as a prop for a story? I brought that in. He said, oh, that's fine, it's okay, there's no worries. I didn't realise that he was joking at the time. So cut to me arriving at the school with a disarmed grenade and a training mortar shell, and the bomb squad immediately being called. Definitely an interesting day. The local schools had to be evacuated. They put it under a plastic bucket to keep it nice and safe. But you see how just communication can be a challenge for me. As well as that, during classes I experienced quite a large amount of stress. The amount of work I had was basically, just thinking about it, maybe 6-7 classes a day for 5 days a week. And the amount of things I had to prepare for, do homework for, it just bogged me down to the point where I got so sick from stress that I basically couldn't go into school for almost half the time for 2 years. After a while, classes were cut down for me. So I was given some escapes, essentially, to help me focus on subjects that I cared about and that I wanted to progress with. I focused really heavily on computing and administration and English. Maths, keep that away from me, not my favourite thing. But I managed to get through and I got into college. Going into college, I found an immediate difference. There was less supports there, but there was less stress over the class. I had one thing to focus on. I could give it all my attention, and at the top of that, I was being treated like an adult. I wasn't being treated like, oh, look, there's a wee kid there, let's focus on him, make sure he does right. It was, you're an adult, you're in charge of your own path, this is what you're here to do. So I successfully got through my year of college, passing with a HND in administration. In 2017, I was asked to help with the social inclusion project, which is now currently held at Arch. When I was told about it, I was immediately expressing interest because it's an opportunity to help people that are going through the same things as me, the same stresses, giving escapism and some form of reprieve from the normal stresses of life. And I also got to find out I got to play games and things and run stuff for people, and I was like, sign me up immediately, that's great. But after that, it turned into a massive passion for me. So I began to progress down that route more and more. I loved seeing the impact that everything I did had on young people and some adults. It was just amazing seeing the difference in people. I've seen people come in through a door who would not be willing to speak to you, would turn their back from you, go do their own thing, but over weeks and over months, slowly they'd build and they'd be really talkative, they'd be friendly, and that would impact other things they were part of. So lastly is just about employment for myself. I've struggled a lot with employment. Out of college I was told, well, it's a HND, be pretty easy to get work with it. So I applied to, I think it was around 50 council jobs across a 1 year period. Not a lot, but what I could handle at the time. During every single one of these, I would double tick to make sure that I got an opportunity for interview as I met the minimum requirements for the job position. Unfortunately, I only got an interview for 2 of these positions, and from those interviews, I was told my interview was perfect, but I lost out on experience. After feeling really demotivated, I turned towards the Youth Guarantee Project. It's got a new name now. I cannot remember for the life of me what it's called. But I was put onto work placements, the first of which being a position at a double glazing business. Immediately, stress, did not like that one bit. No, keep it away from me. But after that, I was put into an art shop where I was a sales assistant running things. I managed to get a job for a year out of that before, unfortunately, becoming redundant over COVID. Recently, I have been fortunate enough to gain a position with Hope for Autism as one of their program coordinators, where I create groups, run them, run training presentations, keep people in the loop about autism and other similar topics. Just scrolling from below here. I noticed most of the supports I had from primary all the way to, well, now. I knew they were there, but for the most part, they didn't impact me as much as they should have. Lots of the times I was feeling like I was left to my own devices and that I was sitting there sort of struggling myself to get through this obstacle. It helped me grow as a person because now I want to make sure that no one has to go through the struggles that I went through. Maybe that's for better or for worse, but I'm really keen to make sure that young autistic people don't have as much issues with stress with the school environment and with moving into employment. I can't really say much about what I would do to fix that. I am not well informed enough about how projects like that run. So what's next for me? I've obviously started with Hope. I hope to continue my work there. I was engaged during COVID, and I hope to push through and make my own path with that. Truth be told, don't know where the next few years are going to go. See how it goes, and hopefully try and make a wee bit of a difference. Thank you everyone for listening here, and if you have any questions for myself or Ramon, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That was excellent. I think there's quite a few questions that will be coming through as well. The first one is Bert Thompson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay there? Yes? Well, right.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, good. Just a couple of observations, come questions there. I think my son's deaf, and it's a bit of similarity with autism. He found that going into social situations like parties, funerals, weddings, etc., he always felt a bit excluded and left early. I don't know if you've experienced that, but people feel uncomfortable yet they don't feel able to communicate at times. The other one was work situations there. My son get turned down for a lot of jobs. The reason was, you will not get insurance, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. Did you find a lot of barriers, or did you get employed quite easily? How would you have described it, or how could we improve things? Thanks very much, Chair.
I think for me, the first step is awareness. I think if we as a council and as potential employers are aware of the issues that I've just presented and that Adam's articulated so well, the lived and living experience, then we can start to make the reasonable adjustments that are required through our equalities duties, but also to be autism informed and the specifics that are required for that. There's a lot that could be done. And it's a huge task, but I think that if we have, for example, legislation that can help us support autistic people and people, neurodivergent people and people with learning disabilities, that would be a start.
Thank you. Ross?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to you both for your presentations. Massive credit to you both for your work on this. I've certainly found it very informative, and I think it's so incredibly important that we're all, as elected members and as the council, and everyone as individuals are pushed to do a lot more in this, and that it's important that we engage with the neurodiverse community and autistic people when we're making our policies, our plans, action plans and so on, and just in everyday life. We're mindful of our language and that we take from lived experience. A lot of the things that I had to know were already covered in your presentation, but just a few things. I appreciated you picked up on the diverse nature of the autistic community. No two autistic people are the same. I think that's one of the stereotypes a lot of autistic people face, and I think we need to do a lot to recognise. It's important that we recognise that intersectionality. I know a lot of autistic people also identify as LGBT, and there's lots of other factors. I know from experience, I've got my own experiences, but through interacting with friends who are autistic, one of the stereotypes they face is you don't look autistic, so they then don't receive the support, and it's almost like they need to act a certain way to get that support. I don't know if that's something you guys have come across as a barrier and a stereotype. I suppose my questions relate to what more we can do as a council, and it's sort of been touched upon already to make South Lanarkshire a more welcoming place for autistic people. But especially, what are some things we can do as elected members to be more accessible? Whether it be through surgeries, information we put out, just whatever ideas you guys have. And I'd love to engage with you further outside this meeting on this. And what support is there any more support Arts needs from the council or anybody else to fulfil some of its duties and carry out more of the great work you guys are already doing?
Aye, and thank you for the very positive comments. I think Adam exemplifies everything that I was trying to articulate in that presentation. He's articulate, he is highly intelligent, but he still has loads of support needs, and he was very able to articulate that himself. But he was subject to bullying, he was subject to stereotyping, and he was subject to disability hate crime. And we know that 98% of disability hate crime goes unreported. We know that for Police Scotland data. So I think the elected members, I think, again, coming back to, that being aware and being informed is hugely, hugely important. And if elected members were so inclined, I would have no problem doing an awareness session with elected members at Arch or anywhere else. Myself and Andrew who facilitates the social inclusion project. We deliver that on an ongoing rolling basis. And I think that understanding and insight and awareness would be crucial. I think that if elected members are aware of how autism can present, then they can then make reasonable adjustments themselves, and as you said, in their communication or in their approach. I think we often talk about making the implicit explicit for autistic people. So everything that we take for granted as neurotypicals, the communications that we make, the sarcasm, as Andrew referenced, people making references that autistic people don't understand, to avoid those things, to be much more straightforward and direct in our communication and not patronising. I think I think Andrew would agree, Adam would agree with me that we have talked at length about the patronising attitudes of neurotypical people, well-meaning neurotypical people, but who will go in assuming that because Adam is autistic that he has a learning disability, and talking to him in a way that he feels is offensive, and perhaps not taking into account his very highly intelligent responses. So I think they're the kind of things that would be helpful for elected members to bear in mind.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that answer. And something else I forgot to mention, that Adam you'd said you're interested in doing a lot more for young autistic people, and you mentioned you'd like to be involved in projects. You're not exactly sure how they run, and I suppose that the point I'd make is that these projects need to be run by folk with lived experience. Like, folk with lived experience have the most to contribute to these things. And I mentioned at the beginning, I think that's crucial that we engage with the neurodiverse community, and anything that we do is driven by them, what they need. And as I said, understanding the diverse nature. Not everyone's the same. Thank you.
To make another point about it, you're absolutely right, and it's something that I feel particularly passionate about, that the lived and living experience needs to be front and centre. I mean, none of us would disagree with that. But I think that what I see at a national level and local level is that we need the three elements of the community to come together. The autistic people themselves should be the drivers, but we need the engineers and we need the allies as well to work collaboratively. And it's only when the three elements work together that we'll be able to move things forward, because autism, as I've just articulated, is a social communication challenge, and autistic people are desperately wanting to get their point across, but often they're needing the assistance of allies to do that and to work together. So it's about working to our respective strengths and recognising our challenges. So.
Mark?
Thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, if I can just say thanks again for the presentation. I did find it genuinely informative. I've got a couple of wee questions. I'm not sure which of you would rather answer them, but I think one certainly for yourself, Adam, was from listen. It was quite interesting that you said you'd applied for about 50, maybe more jobs in a calendar year with councils, and only get 2 interviews despite ticking the box that for the guaranteed interview schemes. I'm just wondering. Obviously, I don't know what kind of jobs you were applying for, but I'm kind of wondering, do you feel that the application process in the public sector makes it difficult to make clear that you have, that you meet the minimum criteria for certain jobs, and is there any kind of, would support around that be useful so that people can, or they can show that in their application, and on the other side, is the other jobs we post that are maybe not clear in what you feel are not clear in what the minimum criteria are, is that a barrier on the opposite side, that maybe people are wasting time applying for jobs that that they don't have the right qualifications or experience for? It'd just be interesting to get your take on it.
It's kind of a tricky one to answer there. With my experience in it, when I applied, there was just a single box for me in some of the applications, not all, but in some of the applications there was just one box to say you had something that categorised you for double tick. In some of the other applications, when it went into specificity, it would categorise it as a learning disability at the same time as autism, which I've got autism, I've not got a learning disability, but to get double tick, I'd have to tick that. Overall, I'd say it's mainly just consistency, because throughout most of those applications, the section on double tick was varied. There was some that were better than others. There was some that had, you know, more like detailed places to add, like, you know, what sort of things you'd require if you got an interview, etc. But yeah, mainly consistency for me is the huge thing for there. Yeah.
Yeah, come back in. Thanks very much. It's interesting to hear that, actually. I'm wondering as well, and this is maybe one for both or either of you, are there any particular issues or services that you think would produce the biggest result if there was kind of room for investment in them? If, you know, that if councils could make a difference somewhere, that would be the place that you think we should concentrate it. And I guess related to that, are there any kind of examples of things that are, without naming names of individuals or anything, but any particular things that are done quite well and things that are done quite badly, you know, just kind of you know, examples of things that we could emulate and things that we should avoid, basically. So it's quite broad, but any thoughts you have would be appreciated.
know that the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and maths, are the strengths of most neurodivergent people. That's the areas that they gravitate towards by and large. And I think if councils began to realise that the STEM subjects, the STEM areas, could be somewhere where some additional attention could be focused, might be a good start. I would also include accountancy in there as well. So I would say science, technology, engineering, maths and accountancy, and dare I say it, law. I've been supporting the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service in this authority, in this sheriffdom, and there are many parent carers, believe it or not, who are in that service and who are autistic themselves. So.
Elaine, is it something you want to come in on?
Yeah, I just wanted to take an opportunity to come back on some of the things that we've heard this afternoon. Obviously, you know, I'm working in HR, so just wanted to let you know that we have been working closely, and Ramon's mentioned Andrew specifically, so certainly I've been working closely with Andrew in terms of doing some autism awareness and covering obviously all the neurodivergent issues here, and we've done that with managers, and we also have done a joint session, or a few joint sessions actually, between HR officers and the trade unions, and with that in mind is about how we can support our employees that are presenting neurodivergent, you know, and thinking about all the supports that we need to put in place for that. And those sessions have been fantastically received, you know, from the officers, from the managers, and certainly from my HR. And it's something that I'm going to keep on going. You know, Andrew delivers it absolutely fantastically, you know, and the request that I then have in terms of can we get more sessions, so it's something that's certainly high up on our criteria from the HR within the council. So just wanted to, you know, reassure members around that. On that, obviously some of the issues were around actually who are our potential employees. So linking in, really interesting to hear what Adam had to say. You know, so we obviously are very conscious of that as well, and thinking about what supports we have to put in place. We've done quite a bit of work in terms of our job profiles. You know, you asked about, you know, our job profiles, our job adverts, and it's about making sure that we have them written properly. You know, so are we clear about what we actually need? And there's been a bit of movement over the years about how our job profiles are written, you know, in terms of that essential and desirable criteria. And we've gone back to that so that actually our potential applicants absolutely know what it is we're looking for, but we're always looking at it to see how can we improve that. I think, thankfully, in terms of some of Adam's points, in terms of South Lanarkshire's application at this moment in time, and again, we are still looking at that, you know, where you're looking at that double tick, and we do ask the question about, if selected, what supports do you need in terms of that interview process. Now, that's not to say that we always get it right, because actually from an HR perspective, you know, I've had issues raised to me, so it is about looking about, you know, well, what else can we do? So some examples that I've had recently for an autistic applicant was actually about giving interview questions in advance. Now, whereas years ago that would have been, oh no, you can't do that because somebody then can be prepared for their interview. Well, actually, is that such a bad thing? You know, our applicants should be prepared for the interview. So we've put adjustments in place such as that, about providing those questions in advance, giving somebody longer, you know, so perhaps choosing, you'll know, in terms of if you apply for a job in South Lanarkshire and you're selected for interview, you get to pick the slot that you want. So we're encouraging some, you know, that actually you might want to take the last slot so that you're actually getting a bit more time, or we're actually just changing those time slots to make sure where an individual will need more time to hear the question and think about about how they're going to answer, then we will do that as well. So really just wanted to reassure members that certainly from HR perspective and the managers, there's a lot of work that we are doing, and we will continue to work with Andrew, obviously working in Alison's teams in terms of what else we can do. Absolutely about cascading that information to our managers and getting that key narrative out there about what we need to do to support our employees, but also our potential employees that are coming in the future as well. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has anything for myself.
Margaret, before I come to you, if you indulge me for just 1 minute, I was going to ask about the application form. I know that Adam's raised a concern more than anything else about the double ticking. Is it possible for us to have a look at the application form? It would just be sent out, and also it might be a good idea to speak to Arch about the form itself to see if there's any adaptations that can be made to it.
Yeah, happy to have a look. And as I say, you know, I know we have that double tick and we put, there's a bit of narrative that can be put on there, but more than happy to have a wee look at that and do any checks that we need to do to make sure that we are absolutely fully compliant and doing everything we can, Councillor Razak.
Thank you, Elaine. Margaret?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say thank you for coming along in the presentation. I currently look after 4 children who have autism, 4 teenagers, each with different needs, different behaviours, and I've got to treat them all differently. I've got 2 coming up to leaving school who they don't know what they want to do, not got a clue. Their outcome's not very positive at the moment. I've got a 20-year-old who won't go to an interview because I'm not allowed to go along with him to help him to understand the questions. So I'm really pleased that Elaine is saying what she's saying, because I think that would be a great help to him. The fact that I could prepare him if I had like a list of questions and reassure him what was going to be asked, rather than him getting into the unknown and not understanding what's going on. And I do agree there's a lot more that needs to be done to help them, because, you know, Lewis is 20. He's not worked, frightened to apply for a job, and there's loads of barriers. So I'll maybe reach out to you separately for the meeting and reach out to Elaine and see what can be done to help. So thank you.
Tony Slavin.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm the chair of the Scottish Disabled Members Committee for Unison, and also the National Committee, and I do representations all over the country regarding disability discrimination. And what Elaine says is halfway to what's happening. I've represented people who have applied for a multitude of jobs, people that are neurodiverse, people that have autism, and they have asked for reasonable adjustments before the interview, and a lot of times that's not happened. So we maybe have to look at that, and we should also, and I would like to have Raylan and Adams take on this? I mean, who says an interview, a formal interview in front of a panel is the best way to assess whether somebody is able to have a job and take on employment? Why don't we look at things like trial periods and stuff like that, and also the supported stuff that happens. But the reasonable adjustment of giving somebody the papers before is a double-edged sword, just as Elaine said, and as I said, I'd like to hear what Roman and even Adam think about is a formal interview in front of a panel the best and easiest way to assess whether somebody is best suited for the job. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Raymond.
I think there is no one answer to that. I think a multi-pronged approach would probably be better. A broad spectrum, for want of a better way of putting it, of interviewing or of trying to elicit information in a non-threatening environment. Obviously, many autistic people, in fact, one of the central tenets of autism is anxiety. Adam's alluded to that himself, and it's about trying to assuage that anxiety as far as possible. But you know, I think that the important point that's been made here, and I completely agree, is that there's a willingness to learn, a willingness. It's like an iterative approach, to borrow another term. It's about learning as we're going, and I think it depends very much on the individuals. There will be individuals who may well respond to a kind of panel type interview scenario, and there will be other individuals who may find it balk at that prospect and not even go for the interview if they find there's going to be more than one person talking to them. So I think it's about us being flexible and being prepared to make those adjustments and to be imaginative as well. And I think that you know, I know that the local authority and that most employers have a kind of standard operating procedure, you know, an SOP, and I think it's about being able to step outside that SOP sometimes and say, well, how can we make this responsive? So it's no, I don't know if that answers Tony's point, but that's what I would be saying. It depends on the individual.
I'm aware we are overdue with the eye break. Are you happy for me to just continue for an extra 5 minutes? Okay, thank you very much. I'll be very quick because I'm fully aware that we're overrun. But again, because it is such a fascinating subject, and that there is an issue, and I think the members have taken it on board as well. The first one is the numbers that are using the service. You haven't told us any of that.
We have a footfall. We don't. We've intentionally not recorded people's confidential details. We don't enter anything into Swiss or into the new Fusion system. We intentionally don't do that. So we record footfall, we record the use of the building, and we have thousands upon thousands of people using the Arch building every year, and it has increased year upon year upon year. So when we do committee reports or reports to the Chief Social Work Officer, he asks us about footfall, and I can say, for example, that in 2018 to 2020 it was well over 3,000, and that was up until lockdown. Obviously the lockdown affected that. We then adapted ourselves and went online, and we used Zoom to right throughout COVID to support the community, and that was described by many people as a lifeline. We have then resumed after post-COVID, after lockdown finished, and we've now seen the same kind of numbers, but we could easily upscale many times over in terms of the demand.
Okay. The second one is, we have spoken about employment. If you just keep it on, it's okay. We have spoken about employment quite thoroughly there. The other one was housing. I'm finding caseloads coming through with families that are in houses where they've got someone that's got autism that needs their space but doesn't have that space. But have you had any meetings or discussions with housing department?
We have indeed. We've actually supported several families recently who have had housing issues, one of which is a woman from Ghana and her son who attended Royal Glen High School with quite high support needs. and she had been in a flat for 7 years. We got her a house. Housing colleagues have been more than amenable. We've also done joint training and awareness sessions with housing staff who have been very enthusiastic about learning more about autism and neurodiversity generally. So we've also contributed to the review of the homeless policy. Arch was included in that, and I'm proud to say that we influenced that and will continue to influence housing policy. We have a member of housing on our steering group, Eileen Dobby, who is a very welcome addition, and she's very passionate about representing the autism community in housing.
I'm really pleased to see that, because like I said, temporary accommodation seems to be of huge concern because of the fact that they're going into a new environment, and this maybe a claustrophobic environment because it's other people there. And I'm pleased to see that, you know, there's work being done by our housing department for that. And no, I'll leave it at that, because I think I'll take the rest off when we speak afterwards. If we can just take a 5-minute break. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ramon and Adam. Apologies. I was going to say Andrew because I got fixated. You are more than welcome to stay, and if you want to leave, you're more than welcome to. Either way. Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 4, the annual report on mainstreaming equalities and diversity social work resources, page 7 to 16. And can I invite Martin Kane and Kiana Stewart to speak to the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take the committee through this report. A wee bit daunted now because it will be quite a hard offering to follow, given what you've just heard, obviously, previously. So the purpose of this report is just to give a general overview of the social work contribution to the whole mainstream inequalities and diversity issues. So Section 3 of the report just really covers the background within what social work operates. So there's obviously quite a heavy focus on the statutory background within which our services operate. And a lot of our services, as you'll see, in fact, the vast majority of them are targeted services. And if you just look at 3.3 and 3.4 of the report, there's a wee table there that just covers some of the key areas that we obviously work on a day-by-day basis. Section 4 of the report covers mainstream inequalities and looks at a lot of the partnership agendas where we're also trying to mainstream that agenda, not just within a council context, but within a wider partnership domain. Section 5 of the report, and this is really the key bit of the report for us, and you'll see a lot of information in the appendix as well in relation to numbers and reach that we cover as well. But just picking up in Section 5 of the report, we obviously contribute to 4 of the Council's equality outcomes. And just in a general context, you'll see in 5.1 of the report just some of the work that we do in terms of staff training around this and awareness raising of the issues so that our staff are equipped, obviously, as best as they can be to work in this agenda. And equally, some of the reach we have in terms of the diversity of communities and families that we work with, just in the table highlighting the breakdown there of translation services that have been provided to members of the community. And that again, interestingly, has grown year on year, as you'll see, albeit just a wee health check around some of the figures. It can often be the same families that we're working with in terms of some of the numbers that you see there. Just in picking up some of the specifics, you'll see in the rest of Section 5, what we've tried to do is segment that by some of the older people and adult areas that we work in, some of the children's areas and some of the sort of justice services we provide. So within that kind of adult and older people element, the areas that we're obviously working on that are possibly new from what you've heard from last year are things like Home First and Blantyre Life and the technology-enabled care agenda. And that's maybe something we would like to come back and speak about at a future opportunity if that's available, just in terms of the whole technology-enabled care and how we're scaling that up to actually support people. You'll see there as well, the carers support we're offering continues to grow year on year, and that's a real success for us, and that's something we're obviously very pleased about. Just in relation to children's services, some of the stuff that Ramon and Adam referred to resonates with what we actually do around children that are looked after as well, where we're really having to do tailored pieces of work for those groups of children. And obviously Arch is listed there as well, and I don't need to cover that because they obviously covered it much better than I would. And in justice services, we've obviously got unpaid work in the Caledonia programme, just highlighting 2 good examples there of where we're trying to do that whole mainstreaming agenda. So really, I'm not going to take the time to go through everything because there's a lot of information in the report. Jana and I are happy to take any questions and we'll answer that where we can. And if we can't answer it, we'll certainly come back to you on that. But just taking members back to the recommendations within the report, it's just that obviously the content of the report's noted and the contribution of social work to that mainstream inequalities and diversity agenda. And as I say, Chair, happy to take questions.
Thank you. First person is Grant.
Thank you. On page 9 of the report, you talk about BSL, British Sign Language, and it says that 6 to 8 times supporting deaf people within the community and interactions with social work have increased from the previous year. I'd be interested to know, is that face-to-face, online, is it an emergency situation? Just as a breakdown of the actual figures and how that worked.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have the detail of each of the events on at the moment, but it's certainly something that we could look into for you and come back. Certainly over the course of COVID and probably subsequent times since then, there probably has been much more online activity than what there was previously. So probably a combination of each, but I wouldn't like to be definite about that, but I would imagine a combination of each. And I think the nature of our social work services as well, there are occasions where there may be emergencies. It could be services that are occurring or required out with office hours, and that would be something our emergency social work service would pick up. But I would be more than happy to look at the detail of those events and come back directly to Councillor if that would be acceptable.
Okay, did Grant want to come back?
Just thank you, I'd be interested to your point, thank you. And thank you, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Ross Clark.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also on the language section in it. And I suppose, you know, I'd like to know if we think we're doing enough on this. Like, do we currently experience any gaps in the system where someone has to wait a long while for translation to be available, or if it's not available, do we have any improvement targets? You know, how well do we think we're doing on this?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Certainly we've not had any feedback directly from our operational colleagues regarding challenges. We certainly have seen quite an increase in terms of the translation activities over the last year, interpretation. So I think certainly any conversations we do have within our local groups, that hasn't become, been raised as an issue. It's something that I think we need to continue to revise to ensure that Language Line is probably the most appropriate supports for individuals. It may well be that we need to look at more face-to-face activity where there is quite a bit of engagement, or some of the detail needs to be explored a wee bit further. So I think it's probably more just about the most appropriate support that individuals need. But there certainly hasn't been anything raised directly through social work operational teams to say that there is a problem there. Thank you.
Yes, it's also really quite tricky to put a target against that type of activity, because a lot of it is needs-led, and we're responding to, sometimes we can respond to a crisis, sometimes we can respond to a more planned piece of activity, but generally what we try and do with all of that type of work is everyone that comes to us will be assessed on an individual basis through a co-produced assessment, and if that requires the input of obviously translation or access to additional supports, that would be actually implicit within the assessment that we do. And if that takes longer and that takes more time, that's certainly time that we would see as well spent.
Bert?
It happened a couple of years ago now, so it's not quite relevant, but there's two occasions I had contact from people. They went to court and couldn't get access to an interpreter. And I was just wondering, how easy is it for somebody in that situation to get somebody, or agency? Is there plenty of interpreters about, or is there a shortage, would you say? Just gives a sort of general feel there. Because it costs them the anxiety, and it costs the court and the person time and money. Thanks, sir. Thanks, Chair.
Bert, I don't think that's a council issue. I think that's more a legal issue because I think it's the courts that would provide
Well,
an interpreter.
Chair, it was the social work for the council that were dealing with it, and it was even supposed to supply it. So I was just wondering, in general terms, then, if it did come back to the social work in their department, how easy is it for them to access? That's all, Chair.
Okay. Fiona?
Thank you. Again, certainly through our social work teams, the information is widely available in terms of access to those services, and the policy is, stands for any of the social work services, whether they're based in the court settings or any other social work setting. Again, that isn't something that has come up recently that I'm aware of, and again, we do ensure that the information is circulated on a regular basis to staff. And just to raise that awareness, and again through our staff training, is certainly something that we would encourage people to be fully understanding of the services that are available out there.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Tony?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for the officer's report. If we go to 5.1.1, increase the number of people from ethnic backgrounds employed. If you look at the table below there and the percentages completed by November 2023, you can see, I think these percentages are the same throughout all the resources. The quality and diversity awareness 43%, and unconscious bias 36%. They're well under 50%, well under half of the employees. However, looked at making these sort of things, especially the race discrimination, excuse me, making them compulsory for staff to actually go through these learn online activities.
Alison?
Thank you, Chair. Just to advise everybody that these courses are compulsory for employees. They're also available for elected members as well. It was all the training for equality was reviewed a couple of years ago, and it was kind of like set the time scales and time frames which people should go and do these online awareness programmes, because legislation does change. So it is mandatory for everybody.
Why is it only less than half? The percentage, you say less than half the employees have done it?
That's me now, sorry about the delay there. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously cumulative by this point in the year, so we can run these figures again, if that would help, just to see what they're sitting at now. Obviously, we've got 3,000 or so employees, as you'll see, so they're quite a big workforce. There's quite a bit of changeability across that workforce as well, and what you're obviously trying to balance that off against is there are also other online mandatory courses that staff will be doing at a point in time as well. So it's trying to balance that off. But that's all, in terms of assuring you about how we monitor this, that's all monitored through our Learning and Development Board. So these types of things are on the agenda as a standing item. And we're constantly reminding managers to remind staff, etc. as well, that to do their mandatory training requirements in a given year. But we're happy to rerun these reports at a point in time again, if that would help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was actually going to ask a similar question to what Tony did. I can think of the kind of nature of social work. There's very few roles I would think that probably wouldn't require a decent understanding and a sensitivity towards the service users that we're working with, and it feels instinctively a wee bit disappointing to look at the percentages that have completed these training courses. I appreciate they're mandatory, and I appreciate also that it's a snapshot in time and that there's a lot of demands for other things to be done. But I would hope that maybe that it can be really pressed upon everyone that these are crucial, that they serve a real importance. And I'm just wondering, it's not necessarily something that has to be mentioned at this meeting or fed back in any sort of public forum, but I'm curious if we're aware if there's any resistance or reluctance to doing these sort of things amongst any not necessarily individuals, but groups within social work resources, maybe kind of levels of staff, or, and hopefully not. But if there's any factors that are affecting these kind of numbers, I'm wondering if that would be something that we're on top of and can deal with privately if necessary. But yeah.
Yeah, I can take that back through the Learning and Development Board, no problem, if you're looking for further assurances that way. Yep.
Yeah, I've just got a couple very quick ones. I noticed on the table in page 9 that the Kurdish Sorani was 102, which is very high. So I take it that's with Syrian refugees. I take it that would be the reason for it. I'm in a way pleased that we are offering this facility and it's being used as well, which is excellent to see. My second question is on 5.1.1.3, and it's a counselling through school service. What you have put the piece in, but it would be quite good to have a bit more information about waiting times for them to access these services, because that's always one question we always ask is in any meeting when something like this comes in front of us, is what are the waiting times for the different services? Is it possible to get that?
Yep, we can circulate information on the waiting times for the CAM support in schools. Yep. Because I understand the context as to why you'd be asking that one. Just obviously there's been a kind of some long-standing issues around like waiting times across the country in terms of CAM services. Just in terms of the Sorani point you had mentioned, that we did have a look back into that one, and just what there is, we're supporting is quite a number of families there. So there's quite a number of episodes and follow-up episodes that we're doing with those families. So it's a wee bit tricky in that when I was just describing the report and talking you through it, I was saying just a wee bit of a health warning around the figures, because some of it is more episodes of families coming back multiple times around that. Mm-hmm. But as you say, it's good to see the breadth of what we're doing in the table in terms of the diversity of who we're supporting.
That's exactly the reason I said that, because it shows you that what you are doing is working, and that people feel confident that they can use that service as well. If there's no other questions, we can note the report. Thank you very much. So it's agenda item 5, the BSL position in schools update. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I've been in touch with education colleagues just for a quick update on what the position is. Calderside Academy currently have 2 pupils in the secondary deaf education unit at Calderside. They are predicting that the numbers there are going to stay low, and at the moment what they're doing is they're having a service review to assess the best and the most cost-effective means of supporting young people with BSL. There has been a Scottish Government survey that was carried out, but it's quite dated now. It was in March 2023. And of that, 72 out of 125 primary schools responded to that. This was in relation to the 1+2 languages. And of the 72 who responded, none are offering BSL as language 2. 7 are offering BSL as language 3. And 2 primary schools are currently teaching Makaton as language 3. So that's the primary school position. 5 out of 17 secondary schools responded to the survey, and out of these 5, none of them were offering BSL as language 2 or 3. 1 out of the 7 ASN schools responded, and in this school, BSL was not being taught, but Makaton and Picture Exchange Communication System, or PECS, are. So that's the position across the schools. However, that might change because there was the focus last year around the Highland Learning Resources, the BSL Highland Learning Resources, which were brought to our attention by Councillor Ferguson. So we then investigated and found out what that was, and there are more primary schools who may now be teaching BSL as a result of that. But we do need to kind of like find out what the current position is with the Highland Learning Resource. Crosshouse Primary School are using BSL as one of their languages, and they did a whole school training using the Highland Council training resources. And these resources have been highly rated, and they feel that it's going really well, so they're going to continue with that. And that's the position at the moment across the schools. Obviously, it's quite dated because the survey was March 23, but we'll keep on top of that and report back as and when.
Thank you, Alison. I've got Grant.
Thank you for that information. Just be interested in the numbers of school that we do of raising the BSL profile within schools, and most people maybe don't understand sign language or not know what it was, and that there would be a career path involving sign language. So it would be having somebody maybe in the schools and talk about their experiences as an interpreter or working with deaf people and what that involves, because it's not just a language, it can also be a career perspective as well. So maybe it's looking at something, maybe somebody like myself, maybe looking at coming in and doing as more of a deaf role model, and how people who have got this experience in language has helped me to become where I am today. And it maybe also helps to enhance council services as well, because I think that we don't have enough at the moment. We talk about at Crosshill, at schools, they all have the access to that information, but the information about career paths and roadshows and all that maybe is not included within that, and they don't really have the full picture. And I think maybe we would benefit more from having a better picture, and also within the council and not just at schools level as well.
Okay, thank you for that question. We are currently working on the second edition of the BSL plan, the Lanarkshire plan, and part of the national plan for BSL is that there is an awareness raised right across of BSL culture, the BSL language. We do have a requirement in the national plan, which will be taken into the local plan, that information is made much more accessible, both written information and also information that's contained on our website. So we're currently working with our steering group that we set up for the first plan, which consists of members of the deaf community and organisations across Lanarkshire. North Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire and NHS Lanarkshire are working to meet the tight deadlines that have been set for the publication of the second plan. Once that's been done, we will go out to consultation and look at the best ways of making sure that we are meeting the needs of the deaf community. One of the things that we've spoken about is to do exactly what you were saying, Councillor Ferguson, and to go out and do awareness raising session, maybe a BSL week, have this a roadshow, if you like, across various parts of Lanarkshire, and doing that in conjunction with our See Here colleagues, because there is a crossover from the BSL plan into the See Here plan. So that's all being worked on at the moment, and I will bring you more information of that as we progress with that.
Thank you very much, and also thank you to the Chair for allowing me to speak to that.
You're welcome. I've got a couple of questions on this. I went with Grant to Calderside Academy, and I think it might be a good idea for the the forum maybe to pay a visit and arrange a visit to Calderside Academy and see what's being done there, because I think it gives us a more balanced view, especially when there's a service review going on for that. But I'm a bit concerned about the fact there's only 2 pupils that are using the service. When you consider that the frontline services, if you think of the different businesses that would benefit from someone that has been taught sign language, or even the basics of sign language. And I think maybe there needs to be an exercise, and I think that what the exercise you are doing should come to us as well. And I think there needs to be a basis where we need to speak to maybe the heads and tell them the benefits of their pupils learning with the basic sign language. And as a younger generation, it's a lot easier to learn than when you get older. So I always found that the earlier the better is usually the term I use. And I honestly feel that with the number of people, I do have some constituents that use sign language, and even when I can't even do the basic hello and goodbye and how are you, it's quite embarrassing. And it would benefit everyone if we did do this.
Thank you for that. I have been in contact. There's a new head teacher at Calderside who has just recently started there, but she's more than happy to meet a kind of, I've got a couple of dates that might be suitable maybe for 1 or 2 members of the forum rather than everybody to go. So I can give you them.
Yes, that would be
table.
That will be great. Thank you very much.
Can I also just promote that we are still doing BSL awareness sessions? So if any elected member who haven't attended yet want to attend, then that opportunity is still there.
I did attend. Okay, if there's no other questions, the next date of the next meeting is 8th of May. And there's no urgent business, but I would like to bring in 2 things. For the next meeting, Alison, can we maybe have a look at the breakdown of the school meals? Because we did a bit of work on the school meals. And just to see how the communication has been sent out to everyone that is looking for different types. And this other one is I've sent you an email on the Hinduphobia presentation that was given to the Scottish Parliament. So it would be good to have them come over and give us a presentation for the next meeting.
Yep, thank you for that. I will contact and make arrangements for that, and I'll get the information on the school meals as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and that was not too bad. Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.